The days after the wedding felt like moving through fog. Stella barely ate, barely slept. The house that had once been filled with laughter and wedding preparations was now suffocatingly quiet. Every corner reminded her of him: the framed engagement photo on the mantel, the wedding invitations stacked by the door, even the half-packed honeymoon suitcase in her bedroom. Her phone buzzed constantly: calls from friends, messages from relatives, pity-filled texts like, "Be strong. God knows best." She ignored them all. None of them had answers. But Stella wasn't ready to accept silence. She couldn't. Mark couldn't just vanish and leave her with nothing but 4 words. So, she began searching. First, she called his phone repeatedly. Still dead. Then, she reached out to Connell, his best man, who swore he knew nothing. "I thought he was with you," he said, guilt heavy in his voice. She visited Mark's apartment. The place was eerily untouched: shirts still folded neatly, books stacked on the nightstand, a toothbrush resting by the sink. No sign of someone preparing to disappear. The security guard said he hadn't seen Mark since the night before the wedding. Stella's parents begged her to stop, to let it go, but her chest ached with questions too loud to silence. Why didn't he call? Why didn't he explain? Was he hurt? Was he in danger? Or had everything been a lie from the very beginning? Each thought drove her deeper. She started reaching out to people she had never thought to question before: old friends, co-workers, even neighbors. She collected every scrap of information she could find, desperate to piece together the puzzle of the man she thought she knew. And with every question she asked, one truth became harder to ignore. Mark had secrets. Secrets that had been hiding in plain sight all along. Stella's first breakthrough came from an unexpected source: Mark's mother. She arrived unannounced at the older woman's modest bungalow, clutching her handbag like a shield. Mark's mother welcomed her in, eyes soft with guilt, as though she had been waiting for this visit. "Where is he?" Stella asked, voice trembling. "Please, Mama. If you know something, tell me." The old woman sighed heavily. "My daughter, I warned him. I told him not to start what he could not finish." Stella's chest tightened. "Finish what?" Mama Mark shook her head. "Mark, he carries too many wounds. Wounds from his father, from his past. He loves, yes, but when it comes close to commitment, he runs. Always." Her words cracked Stella open. Always. Had there been others? That night, she reached out to Tai, who helped her track down Mark's old acquaintances through social media. One of them, a woman named F, agreed to meet her. F arrived at the cafe with a knowing look. "You're not the first," she said bluntly, before Stella could even speak. "He left me too. Not at the altar, but close enough." Her stomach lurched. Why? Why would he do this? F shrugged, bitterness etched into her face. "He's charming, isn't he? Says all the right things, makes you feel like the center of his world. But when it gets too real, when forever is no longer a dream but a date on a calendar, he disappears." Stella sat frozen, fingers digging into her lap. She wanted to scream, to cry, to defend him. But deep inside, she knew. Pieces were beginning to fit together, forming a picture she didn't want to see. The final blow came when Connell, after days of avoiding her calls, finally confessed over the phone. "There's something you need to know," he said, his voice low. "Mark wasn't just planning a wedding with you. He was also seeing someone else." The room spun around Stella. The man she thought she knew had been living a double life. Stella sat in stunned silence long after Connell's words faded from the phone line. Seeing someone else. The phrase echoed in her head like a drumbeat. Her heart wanted to reject it, to scream that it was impossible. But her mind, sharp and restless, wouldn't let her rest until she knew for certain. She pressed Connell for details. Hesitant at first, he finally admitted, "Her name is Kyoma. I only found out a few weeks before the wedding. He promised he'd end things with her, but I guess he couldn't." Stella felt as if the floor had vanished beneath her. All those late-night calls, the romantic promises, the proposal in the bookstore, had he been splitting his love between 2 women all along? Fueled by rage and a desperate need for answers, she tracked Kyoma down. The woman was beautiful, with sharp eyes that flickered with both suspicion and sorrow when Stella introduced herself. "You're Stella," Kyoma said flatly. "I was wondering when you'd find me." The 2 women sat across from each other in tense silence before Kyoma finally spoke. "He told me about you. Said it was nothing serious. Said I was the one he truly loved." Stella's breath caught. "He proposed to me. We planned a whole wedding." Kyoma's face crumbled. For the first time, Stella saw her not as a rival, but as another victim of the same cruel game. They compared timelines, stories, messages, and the puzzle became horrifyingly clear. Mark had been living 2 lives, weaving promises to both women, stringing them along with the same tender words. By the end of the meeting, Stella's rage had burned into something colder, sharper: resolve. She wasn't just a broken bride anymore. She was a woman betrayed, and she needed to look Mark in the eye, to demand the truth from his own lips. No more whispers. No more half-truths. It was time for confrontation. Finding Mark wasn't easy. He had disappeared from his apartment, cut off most of his friends, and even stopped showing up at work. But Stella was relentless. With Kyoma's help, a strange alliance born from shared betrayal, she finally tracked him down to a quiet guesthouse on the outskirts of town. Her heart thundered in her chest as she climbed the stairs, every step heavy with anger, grief, and a desperate hunger for answers. When she knocked, the door creaked open, and there he was. Mark. The man who had once promised her forever stood before her, unshaven, his eyes hollow, his voice a whisper. Stella. She shoved the door open and stepped inside, her words spilling out like fire. How could you? After everything, after the proposal, the promises, my family, our wedding, how could you walk away? How could you humiliate me like that? Mark collapsed into a chair, burying his face in his hands. I didn't mean to hurt you. I swear I didn't. Her fists clenched. Then why? Why disappear? Why leave me standing at the altar with nothing but a text? He looked up at her, eyes bloodshot. Because I couldn't do it. I thought I was ready, but I wasn't. I was drowning. And his voice broke. I was in love with both of you. I couldn't choose. So I ran. The words sliced through her like a knife. She had imagined lies, betrayal, even cowardice, but not this raw confession of weakness. Stella's chest tightened with fury and heartbreak. You destroyed me, Mark. You didn't just break my heart, you broke my trust, my dignity, my faith in love. And you expect me to understand? He didn't answer. He only wept quietly, shoulders shaking, as if the weight of his choices was finally crushing him. For the first time since the wedding day, Stella realized, the man before her wasn't the hero she had believed in. He was just a broken man who couldn't keep his promises. And she was done carrying his weakness on her shoulders. Mark sat in silence for a long time, his fingers trembling as they tugged at the hem of his shirt. When he finally spoke, his voice was hoarse, like a man confessing sins at the edge of ruin. I was raised to believe marriage was a trap, he began quietly. My father, he destroyed my mother. Promised her love, then crushed her with betrayals, lies, and fists. I grew up watching her cry every night, wondering why she stayed. I swore I would never repeat his mistakes, but I think I became him in a different way. Stella's jaw tightened. She wanted to hate him, to scream at him, but his pain poured out raw, unguarded. I loved you, Stella. I did. But every time the wedding got closer, I heard my father's voice in my head mocking me, saying I wasn't meant to keep anyone, that I'd only hurt you. And then there was Kyoma. She came into my life when I was already falling for you. I thought I could juggle it, that it would fade. But it didn't. It just tore me apart. He pressed his palms to his face, voice breaking. I wasn't running from you. I was running from myself. From the man I knew I couldn't be. Stella's chest tightened. This was the explanation she had been begging for, but it brought no comfort. His words didn't erase the image of her waiting in her wedding dress, humiliated before family and friends. They didn't erase the scars of being abandoned without warning. You could have told me the truth, she whispered, her voice sharp with pain. You could have given me the dignity of choice. Instead, you let me dream, while you planned your escape. Mark looked at her then, tears streaking his face. I know. And I'll regret it for the rest of my life. For the first time, Stella saw not the man she had loved, but a fractured soul trapped in his own fears. But pity wasn't closure. And pity wasn't healing. Stella rose from her chair slowly, her gown rustling against the floor of the dim guesthouse room. Mark looked up at her, his face pale, his eyes pleading, but she felt no pull anymore. For months, she had lived in the shadow of his absence. For weeks, she had chased his ghost, demanding answers. Now she had them. And they weren't enough. You broke me, Mark, she said softly, her voice steady despite the storm inside her. But you don't get to keep me broken. Not anymore. He tried to reach for her hand, but she stepped back. The distance between them felt final. I don't hate you, she continued. But I'll never forgive you. Not because forgiveness isn't possible, but because you don't deserve that gift from me. What I will give myself, though, is closure. With those words, she turned and walked out, her spine straighter than it had been in months. The evening air outside hit her face like baptism, sharp, cold, and cleansing. The following weeks weren't easy. Healing never is. She cried herself to sleep some nights, woke up hollow others. But slowly, she built herself back. She returned to her art classes, reconnected with friends she had shut out, and even laughed again. The world stopped asking her about the runaway groom. Slowly, she stopped asking herself why. Months later, she stood in front of a small group at a women's seminar, sharing her story not with bitterness but with strength. She told them how love can blind, how promises can shatter, and how a broken heart does not mean a broken life. Sometimes, she said, her voice steady, closure doesn't come from answers. It comes from choosing yourself over the pain someone left behind. The room applauded, but Stella didn't bask in it. This wasn't about Mark anymore. It was about her, the woman who had survived betrayal, humiliation, and heartbreak, and had walked out stronger. She no longer carried his absence as a wound. She carried her own presence as a crown. Her forever wasn't gone. It was just beginning with herself.